Welcome to this edition of the Head to Head Podcast. I'm your host, Cam McKinney. This is episode number 71 of the podcast. And in this edition of the podcast, I'm talking about the Mets hiring of Carlos Beltran as their next major league manager. Not because I find this interesting, not because I have a rooting interest in the Mets, but because of the recent trends of managerial hires in baseball. Let's look at some of the recent people who have been named major league managers. Alex Cora, Aaron Boone, David Ross, Rocco Baldelli, Craig Counsell, Jace Tingler, and now Carlos Beltran. What do all of these men have in common? They have had zero prior experience managing, or some of them even coaching baseball teams. And a lot of them, like David Ross and Craig Counsell and Aaron Boone, prior job to being a manager was being in the broadcast booth and being entertaining. So what does that tell you? No, you no longer need to be a gritty, experienced, go through the grind, figure things out type of manager. The Jim Lelands of the world, the Joe Torres of the world, the Bobby Coxes of the world. Those no longer exist in today's baseball. And the men those guys replace, John Farrell's, Joe Girardi, Joe Maddon's, Ron Renicky, Paul Molitor, Andy Green's, Mickey Callaway's, what do all of those men have in common? They are the old school managers who want to impose their will on those teams. Those are the guys who want to be the leaders of the team. When Joe Maddon joins your baseball team, it is now thought of as a Joe Maddon baseball team, like a Terry Francona type baseball team. John Farrell is no longer the manager of the Red Sox because he tried to lead the Red Sox and he wasn't getting along with the players. He wasn't friends with Mookie Betts. He wasn't friends with Xander Bogaerts. He didn't hold Rafael Devers in such high regards. But you bring in Alex Cora and all of a sudden those guys start to produce. That's what Alex Cora is bringing to the Red Sox. Being friendly with the players. That's why. And that's why Aaron Boone is the manager of the New York Yankees. Joe Girardi was not getting along with Aaron Judge. He was not getting along with Gary Sanchez. He wasn't getting along with his star players. Baseball no longer wants a leader who is going to impose their will on the team. They no longer want the guy who's going to be a great strategist. The way that Tony La Russa came up with a closer. The way that Billy Martin let Ricky Henderson steal whenever he wanted. Baseball managers no longer have the power to have that big of an impact on today's game. Who does have that power? The executive, the Theo Epsteins of the world, the Andrew Friedmans of the world, the Brian Cashmans of the world. They have more power than ever before because of analytics. They can come up with what's going to happen at every moment of a baseball game. That's why it's silly to me when people criticize Dave Roberts for the lack of success of this Dodgers team recently. He's not Walt Alston. He's not Tommy Lasorda. He doesn't have the control to have that much impact on what's going on with today's game. So for all those people who are saying, let's fire Dave Roberts, that is silly because he is simply just a figurehead. And that's what they are hiring today. They are not hiring a major league manager to take control of the team. They are hiring a figurehead so that the real people can have real power, so that the Theo Epsteins can have real power. That's what's happening here. It's not the baseball game I grew up watching. Think about this stat that I'm about to say to you. There have been 3 years in a row where a first-year manager won 100 baseball games out of 162. Alex Cora in 2017, Aaron Boone in 2018, and last year Rocco Baldelli. There lies the issue. They are having success, but don't tell me all three of those guys are great baseball managers, because I have doubts about all three of them, and it's nothing against them, but what is their real impact? They are coming into teams that are already stacked, filled with talent. They are just there to get along with the players, and in reality, they are doing their jobs, but they're not great strategists. We are not always thinking, what is Aaron Boone thinking about here? What is Alex Cora Cora thinking about here? What is Rocco Baldelli thinking about here? No, they do not have the experience, or we don't hold them in that high of regard of their baseball minds like we used to. Like, think about when Terry Francona got Andrew Miller. That was a moment where we were like, what is this guy going to do with this bullpen weapon? And I think Terry Francona had a real strategy of what to do with Andrew Miller. Nowadays, these guys are told when to use this guy and exactly how you're going to use this guy. They have no control because they're not baseball lifers. For instance, there's a pattern with these hires. Alex Cora, what's the team that he played for? Oh yeah, the Boston Red Sox. He's now the manager of the Red Sox. Just a coincidence? Maybe not. Aaron Boone, a team he played for at one point was the New York Yankees. David Ross played for the Cubs. Craig Counsell played for, that's right, the Brewers. And Carlos Beltran played for the New York Mets. These are situational managers set to fit perfectly in their situations. Do they feel like baseball lifers? Do they feel like they can move from team to team and manage them well? I don't know, Jim Leland used to. Jim Leland brought back the Pirates. He managed the Tigers, and he won a World Series with the Marlins. Do we think Alex Cora can do that? Do we think Aaron Boone can do that? Do we think that Rocco Baldelli can do that? The answer to that is absolutely not. And I think these type of hires will continue to happen because they're having success. And as long as you have a really good baseball mind as your GM or your president of baseball operations, they will continue to hire yes men. That is what the baseball manager is today. They are just yes men. Yes, yes, yes. They are not experienced guys who are coming up with great strategies. They're not hired to be the leaders of their baseball teams. They are hired to be figureheads. But if you want my opinion, Alex Cora is not a better manager than John Farrell. Aaron Boone is not a better manager than Joe Girardi. And Rocco Baldelli is probably not a better manager than Paul Molitor. They are just willing to do whatever their executive is willing to say he has to do, and the other guys are just not, and they don't get along with the players that they have. This is really a battle of old school, new school. The old school says, hire a Bobby Cox, let him manage the team for 30 years, and you're going to have success. The new school is, let's just bring in a guy who will do whatever we want, and we're going to have success. And that's been proven to be right for the most part. It's right, but is it entertaining? Are we entertained by this? Think about this in football. We have Bill Belichick. We have Greg Popovich. We have those guys in other sports who were like, wonder what those guys are thinking. We hold them in such high regard. We trust them as coaches, and we know what they're going to do, and we are interested in how they're going to try to win a championship each and every year. Is there someone in baseball like that right now? I mean, Joe Madden, maybe, but even then, he's kind of gone nuts with the baseball strategies. Terry Francona is in Cleveland, so we don't really care. None of the big market teams have what I would call a great manager. None of them. They all have these guys that are just going to do the bidding of the general manager. Which is ironic, because when I started to first watch baseball, the Yankees had Joe Torre. The Red Sox had Terry Francona. The Braves had Brian Cox. They all had their best success when they had this guy. I think when you have the David Rosses, and when you have the Alex Coras, and when you have the Aaron Boones, you're going to have short-term success because you have a gigantic payroll and you're going to have star players on that team. But when your team, like the Red Sox, for instance, are going into a rebuild, do we feel good about Alex Cora as the manager of a baseball team where he has to rebuild his roster on the fly? I don't. I'm sorry, I don't. Everything was set up for Alex Cora in his first year to have gigantic amounts of success. Mookie Betts was willing to be an MVP. JD Martinez was on that roster. Chris Sale was on fire. Everything was lined up for Alex Cora to have a really successful first season. His second year, not so great. Now his third year, we don't even know who's going to be on the team. Maybe no Mookie Betts. Maybe no JD Martinez. How is Alex Cora going to react when the stacks are not all filled in his favor? Mets job, for example. They won 87 games with Mickey Callaway as their manager. I could see them winning 95 plus with Carlos Beltran as their manager. Not because Carlos Beltran is a good manager, but because they they have Jacob deGrom. They're going to have Noah Syndergaard. They're going to have a full year of Marcus Stroman. It looks good for Carlos Beltran in the short term, but long term, do we see Carlos Beltran being the manager of the New York Mets for 10 plus years? I don't at all. Think about back in the days when Earl Weaver managed a baseball team forever. This is the list of managers with at least 10 years of managing in baseball. Terry Francona, Joe Madden, Ron Gardenhire, Bob Melvin, Bud Black, Joe Girardi, and Don Mattingly. Terry Francona and Joe Madden are the only ones on that list who we think of as Hall of Fame managers. The rest of them are retread managers who are on their second or third jobs. That's where we are with baseball. There are no Earl Weavers. There are no Walt Alstons. There are no great managers in baseball other than Terry Francona and Joe Madden, and people will have debates about those two. We do not have a clear-cut guy who we think is a great baseball manager. Even A.J. Hinch. I mean, I don't know if people hold A.J. Hinch in such high regard. That situation, I mean, he's on his second job. I think he's the closest thing you could get to a guy that I have a lot of respect for as a manager, because I don't think he's just a yes man. I think baseball has so many issues, but one of the issues that's being ignored is the issue of managers. Managers used to add to the entertainment of baseball. I remember Bobby Cox being kicked out of about 5 baseball games a year and being excited for that to happen. Because boy, when that happened, it added to the excitement of baseball. And yeah, we got rid of the arguments, but now we don't even care about the opinions of these people. I don't care about what Alex Cora has to say about the state of baseball. I don't care what Aaron Boone has to say about the state of baseball. I used to care what Tony La Russa, what Joe Torre, what Terry Francona, what Jim Leland. I used to care about their opinions about the actual state of the game. Carlos Beltran's state of the game doesn't really feel like it's impactful because he was playing it just 2 years ago. Think about that. He doesn't have the experience or being away from the game or coaching the game for me to care about his opinion on the state of it as a manager. Baseball fans in general might not care about this issue as much as I do, but come on, this isn't what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be that managers are these guys who we think of as baseball lifers, who know the game, who we trust, who are going to make big decisions. And part of it was, again, the entertainment value of it was, what is Jim Leland going to do in this situation? What is Terry Francona going to do in this situation? How are these guys going to bring these guys together? And there was a trust in that and a calming presence. And these are just a bunch of younger guys who have just recently played or broadcasted baseball, getting an opportunity to manage a team over the sheer fact that they played for that team not that long ago. And that, to me, is the most troubling thing about this whole thing. I mean, this has happened in basketball too with Steve Kerr, although I do feel it's kind of different because I feel like he can have more of an impact. I think it's better to have a guy like that in basketball because Steve Kerr, to get along with 5 guys, I think that's important. But baseball is supposed to be a sport about strategy, and Aaron Boone doesn't have a strategy. His strategy is, I hope Aaron Judge hits a home run here. I hope Giancarlo Stanton hits a home run here. And I have a really great bullpen and I'm being told how to use it. That's his strategy. Joe Torre had real strategy, though. They're hit and runs. I mean, that's been taken away from the game because we want that gone from the game, I guess. Stealing isn't popular anyway. But if you had a manager with a real strategy that can have a real... Think of what Kevin Cash is doing in Tampa Bay. I think Kevin Cash is one of the rare guys in baseball right now who is actually managing games with an actual strategy. Yes, he's being told when to bullpen it, but he's going with it, and I think he actually has real intention to be a manager. He doesn't seem to me to be just a yes man. He has bought into a strategy, but he has some will in that overall strategy, unlike a lot of these people. I also think another issue of this, it's like, oh, I don't want to pay Joe Girardi what I'm going to have to pay him to be the manager of the Yankees. So I'm going to let him go, and then I'm going to save some money and pay Aaron Boone to be a first-year manager over the fact that he's likable. I mean, these guys are being hired because of likability. They're not interesting strategy guys. I just think it's wrong. It just feels wrong. The whole thing feels wrong. It feels like they're all making splashy hires because, as a Red Sox fan, they say, Alex Cora is going to manage the Red Sox. I remember that guy. Aaron Boone, I remember that guy. But now the Mets are taking it to the next level, being like, here's this guy who might be a Hall of Famer who we all love and adore. He's the next manager of our baseball team. That's just a win-win move for them. But we don't know anything about Carlos Beltran. He's just going to be told what to do. And let me get with the biggest issue here. There was a report that Terry Collins might be his bench coach. So they're going to get a real manager to be his bench coach just so that Carlos Beltran can be the figurehead of the team. This is the most ridiculous thing I've ever done. Baseball is telling you their manager position is not important. Why would they do that? Baseball needs things to be important. Baseball needs to feel important. And for them to be like, no, that spot you used to revere where Bobby Cox used to be in charge, where Tommy Lasorda used to be in charge, with Joe Torre, where Terry Francona, those guys? Yeah, we're done with those type of guys. Now they're just creating figureheads, and I don't think that they're doing real damage to their actual sport by doing this. I mean, we just lost another legend this year in Bruce Bochy, even Ned Yost. Those are old school managers who won World Series because it felt like a dictatorship, really. Casey Stengel, that there's a reason that those guys had success. They were the leaders of the team. They were the faces of the team. Casey Stengel had strategy to platoon and win World Series. Nowadays, I'm not interested in any of today's managers' strategies because I know those strategies are being come up with by nerds and calculators in front offices. That's not interesting. That's not entertaining to watch. In the end, you can talk about how pace of play is a huge issue. You can talk about how the sport is a home run or nothing sport. But I think the real damage that baseball is doing is that in 10 to 15 years, the Carlos Beltrans of the world, the Alex Coras of the world, the David Rosses of the world will no longer be baseball managers, and we will not have any great Hall of Fame managers that we will look back and remember and revere like the ones that we do now. Think if Joe Madden goes to the Angels and goes to a World Series with his third team. Is there any other person other than Terry Francona who you feel could do that in today's major league managers? No. The answer to that is no. I have no faith that Alex Cora could do that. I have no faith that Rocco Baldelli could do that. I have no faith that Carlos Beltran or Aaron Boone can pull that off. Baseball's biggest dynasties had great managers at the helm of them. The 90s Yankees had the calming presence of Joe Torre. The Boston Red Sox had Terry Francona in 2004 and 2007. The Cardinals had Tony La Russa for 20 plus years. The Braves won 15 division titles with Bobby Cox at the helm. The Giants recently won 3 World Series in 5 years because Bruce Bochy was a brilliant baseball mind. It can't all be about the stats. It can't all be about the analytics. You have to have great baseball minds as managers of those teams, because there's also something about this idea that that's what's interesting about Bill Belichick is interesting because we think and we know he is a great football mind, and baseball is missing that. It's missing it greatly, and it needs it. It needs it, or it's not going. Again, baseball needs more things to be interesting, and you can't take away that factor of what is that baseball manager thinking. And too many times nowadays, you put on a baseball game and you don't even care what the manager is thinking in this situation. Even in the National League with a pinch hitter, you know that there's some orchestrated thought of what he's going to do here, where you used to think, Tony La Russa is batting the pitcher 8th. This is a real strategy here. And I know that it's coming from the mind of Tony La Russa, who I respect. And you don't get that nowadays, and that's not right. My last thought on this is that I hope this trend stops at some point. I want guys who have managed somewhere before to be managers, or even coaches to become managers. I want real strategy to come back into the game of baseball, because baseball needs that. They need great minds at the helm of these teams if there's going to be entertainment entertaining. Listen, this is nothing against Alex Cora, Carlos Beltran, even Craig Counsell. They've all had success. I mean, the Phillies are going the opposite direction. They fired Gabe Kapler and brought back Joe Girardi. I mean, that's an old school guy. They ditched the new school. I think that's going to happen more and more because I don't think that all of these guys are going to continue to have long-term success. I think these kind of hires are situational because these guys all used to play for those teams, and they're not going to last a really long time because at some point the situation looks good at first, but it's not going to be great forever. I liked baseball more when the managers mattered because when I started to watch baseball, that's what mattered, was the managers and the teams on it. Now it's some executive the executive isn't even really talking about the state of the game all that much. Baseball needs managers to feel important again so that we can get the next generation of Terry Franconas, Joe Torres, and Bobby Coxes of the world, and Bruce Bochy. I mean, baseball needs those type of guys, and right now they are missing them dearly. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Head to Head Podcast. I'm Cameron McKinney. There'll be a new episode of the podcast every Monday on Apple Podcasts and iTunes. So please rate, review, and subscribe.